Eventually, meaning next class, you guys are going to be creating your own children's book. We're modeling it after this. And so in this book, it's a guy looking back on his family and their history with trains. It's a simple children's book, and that's the general idea. You guys are going to use simplistic language. It is to be written for a 1st through maybe 5th grade. But what you're doing eventually is you're going to be kind of taking aspects or some of those cultural themes we talked about last class. Remember Persia? You're going to be taking some of those and discussing what life was like in the 1920s and comparing it with today, because it's almost 100-year difference. A lot changes, but a lot stays the same. And so we're going to be looking specifically at how aspects of culture has changed and why it's changed, because they're 2 different questions with 2 different purposes. All right, let's learn about trains. Woo! All right, so steam, smoke, and steel. Page 1. Oh, this isn't going to let me do it nicely. Here we go. All right, when I grow up, I want to drive a train, just like my dad does. I think my dad got the best job in the world. He's an engineer. Up in the cab of his giant locomotive, he controls 10,000 tons of rolling steel. Coal, oil, lumber, cars, whatever needs to be carried by the rails, he hauls it with his 4,400 horsepower diesel engine. Computer controls in the cab help drive the train, but my dad does a lot of the driving with hand controls. His train thunders down the tracks like my grandfather's train did 30 years before. My great-great-great-great-great-grandfather liked to brag that he was one of the very first people to ever drive a train in this country. Before trains, people traveled in stagecoaches and buggies. People had never traveled faster than the speed of a running horse. And at first, they weren't too sure about this brand new invention called the steam locomotive. So I guess you could say that trains run in my family. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandmother, my great-great, well, you get the idea. They all drove trains. When I'm grown up, I want to drive a train too. And then maybe I'll have a kid of my own. All right, the purpose of this next part is I want you to expand your individual lists. This is where you're going to take some time. You're going to have about 4 minutes just as a group to discuss what you identified. A lot of it will be overlapping, and that's fine. Again, increase your list with ones that you don't have identified, so that way you have a larger master list, okay? So again, what are the 3 things that we're looking for? Number 1, what's changed? What else?
Why it changed.
Why it changed and how it changed. So please somehow identify that on there. And again, you've got 4 minutes. You're just, if you want to take turns, that's your prerogative, but everyone should be participating, and you should all be increasing your list. Go ahead. About 4 minutes.
So identifying it using the Persia tactic, you could use every single one. It's changing philosophically, economically, in every single way, especially technologically, I think, because America's developed such well, it's not an advanced train system. So what else did you guys put?
So I put, I forgot the name of the guys who went on top of the trains to break them.
Oh, the brakemen?
Yeah, brakemen, I guess. And then, so I said that air brakes were invented to eliminate the need for them and to make it safer.
Since his great-great-grandmother, was it?
Yeah.
This is a point in time where women begin to hold a little bit more responsibility.
If you need to reference the book, I think I have a link to it. If not, I will do that right now.
Trains used to run on steam and not diesel, and it was less efficient.
and you had to make more stops to get more supplies.
Yeah, because it would tire out the fireman, I think it's called. And the fireman would be the one that powered the actual.
Got about 2.5
And
minutes.
also the diesel engines had more power in them than the steam engines, so they were able to pull more and also last longer, like she said.
True. And steam locomotives, as they were called back in young America, they were developing back then, but I do believe they were only built to support a small amount of
Population.
supply. I mean, they didn't. It grew as it went on. Yeah.
Also, the newer trains looked, they were made to look faster and modern. Called streetliners.
Now, group 1, where you at? Give me an example.
Technological change in trains.
Okay, specifically.
Steam engines began diesel engines.
Okay, so how and why?
Why? Because steam locomotives were very. They took more time, and it basically relied on firemen to actually support the train, and they needed to make more stops.
Mm-hmm.
And diesel engines were just more powerful.
Okay, so you're able to haul and ship more things. So that's how it changed. What are some of the reasons for the change? So you've got the fact that they didn't need to stop as often, but what are some others?
Noise.
Noise. So there's difference in noise.
You could pull more.
You can pull more, so the hauling ability.
It's faster.
It's faster. Yeah, it's cleaner, it's more efficient. All right, that's one. Group 6, where you at? Give me another one. Now, the next thing I want you to do with your lists is I want you to use the themes that we talked about, and I want you to identify 1 or 2 themes that could apply to the change. So, just discuss between all of the acronyms Persia. I want you to find 1 or 2. If you can find more, that's perfectly fine. But for each of the examples that your group has come up with, I want you to identify which theme or themes you can explain how it applies to. House of Representatives, so you get the first African Americans elected to the House of Representatives.
The NAACP.
NAACP, which is even still today. Yep, the focus. We call them a lobbying group, and they basically petition to promote rights, civil rights.
They're just trying to advance money.
And what was the tactic used by the NAACP? If they felt things were unfair or unequal, what would they do?
Boycott.
They would boycott,
Protest.
protest, and the one that's legal. Why are there Supreme Court cases?
Sue.
You sue. You sue for change. So that's societal. So that's why I always include that as a societal thing is legislation. It's also political.
Okay.
What else? What else is artistic and entertainment of the era?
Sports.
Sports. Sports become. Why do you think sports became so important at this era?
Because they have leisure time.
They have more leisure time and radios.
Radios.
To listen to share, to start having teams that you want to support. Here's what I want you to come up with. And this is really kind of the crux of getting us into next class. For the inner ring, you're going to ultimately be collecting and identifying at least, I think it's 2 of these for each of the categories. You're going to have to write small. So for each of these, you should have 2 examples of economic from the 20s, 2 examples for political, all of them. And I want you to kind of number them just so you can compare it up here. On the outer ring, you're looking at what are modern day equivalents. So you're looking for things that are comparable with today. So if you're identifying something like labor strikes, if that is something that is comparable to today, if you're looking at something like music and entertainment, compare it with today. That is what this is. And again, I really want you to have at least 2 examples for each to refer to next time. So we're looking at next class, you're going to be writing a story. That's going to basically, you're going to discuss 4 of those 1920s aspects in your story. And of those, you're going to pick 2 of them to discuss the change of how and why it changed. So you're going to identify 4 and talk about them in your story. And then 2 of those that you found the best comparisons, you're going to compare them in your story. It's going to be a short 12-page story. You're going to have like 1 or 2 lines of your story, and then you're going to illustrate it. We got an hour and a half next class for you guys to write children's books.